Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Dev Marketer channel. We're on part 10 of our series of Vue.js fundamentals. All right, now today's a particularly exciting day because we're actually diving into a real world example where we used Vue.js in the real world, and it's something that I think you guys are going to really enjoy. Let's hop on over. I want to show you the end goal of what we're going to accomplish. Now, some of the styling might be slightly different than what you see here. I don't want to get into the CSS styling in here. We're focusing on the core fundamentals of Vue, but I want to show you the core functionality of what we're trying to accomplish, okay? And then kind of some of the stuff that we're going to be looking at. So let's dive over and look at it. Okay, so here, this is actually a moving site. This is, let's say your family's moving from one end of town to the other, or from one city to another, and you want to get, you Google search, movers, and you look up here. This is kind of what the goal is. So now here we've got what we call a lead generation form. You might be familiar with these. This is on the website. We basically try to get leads for, potential customers. Now the goal here, this is a project that I worked on. I built all of this, and so while I did this last week, and when I wrote it, I'm like, this has to be a video. Everyone's gonna love this, I think. And it's actually really simple, but I think it's something that's gonna kind of tie in all the stuff we've been learning really, in a kind of an easy way. All right, so here, as you can see, the information we need is just your zip code that you're moving from, the zip code that you're moving to, and then the day you're moving, right? And so that's basically the main part that we want to do. This will then take you to a second screen that gets more information, but this is the core part of the lead generation form. Now, what makes this interesting and dynamic is as we type in the zip code here. So for example, I'm going to type in a popular zip code, 90210. This used to be a movie that takes place in the Beverly Hills, or a TV show, and it was called 90210. Anyway, so type in 90210, that's the zip code for Beverly Hills, and you can see that as I typed it, it actually went out and found the zip code, what that zip code was, and then put it out here for the user. Now, somewhere I used to live, 97124, you can see once again it searched for it and it found Hillsboro, Oregon. And of course this is dynamic, so 97122. I don't know if this is a value or not. It looks like it's Hebo, Oregon. And let's do 90201. And it's Bell Gardens, California. So again, I don't even know what some of these are, but you can see that as I type in a zip code, once it hits 5 digits, it goes out to an API and finds what that zip code belongs to and then outputs it to the user. Now this makes for a very dynamic experience, and all of this happens with Vue.js, and this is what I'm going to show you how to work with today. So what we're going to learn is obviously tying together different Vue.js fundamentals, and we're also going to be reaching out to an API. So the way that I get this information is through an external API. We take the value of this zip code, I go out to an API, it tells me what that city and state belongs to, and then I display that back to the user. Now I understand that this is only going to really work for the United States because the API that we were working with, that I worked with here, is USPS.com, which is our United States Postal Service. So this is the post service for the United States. And so this is the API that I'm working with here is the one for the United States Postal Service. But of course, you could tie it in with whatever API that works in your country. If you're outside the United States, I'm sure most postal services have some sort of API, or some government agency has an API that does a similar thing. I'm just going to show you on the United States one today, even though I know some of you guys are outside the United States, because I want you to see how it works. But again, you just follow the API documentation for whatever API is near you, or whatever API you're tying into, because you may not be tying into a postal code API, and it will work exactly the same. So the core concepts are exactly the same. Anyway, that's what we're doing. We've talked about what we're doing. Let's go ahead and do it. All right, so now that we've got kind of an idea for what we're gonna do, let's go ahead and take a look at the code, where we're gonna start, and then what we wanna accomplish from here, all right? So if you guys go over and you have the code base from GitHub, those of you guys just joining in for this video, you may not have it, go down into the description on YouTube here and find the GitHub link for the source code, download or clone the repository, and you should have all the code that I've got on screen so you can follow along, all right? Those of you guys that already have the source code might want to do a git pull to bring in the new project files for part 10, and then you can follow along from here. Now again, with all the videos, you're going to want to start at the start.html file. That's where we start the video from, so you can basically start with the same code that I've got and follow along. If you get lost and you don't know what's going on, you want to see the final product, you want to see the end, the code that we have at the end, you can go to end.html to see the final code product over there, okay? So now that we've got the code here, let's take a look at it in the browser, see what it looks like, and then kind of go from there. So let's open up Chrome, and as you can see, this is what you're going to have on screen. You're going to have a background image here, and then you're going to have in the middle, you're going to have this white box that says fill out this form, a starting zip code, an ending zip code, and then a submit button, okay? So very, very basic form, okay? And by the way, you'll have different images every time you refresh, so you may not have the same image that I've got. All right, so that's what the final goal is. Oh, and I should say, so the goal here is we're going to type in a zip code, and then after we hit 5 digits, it's going to go out, go to an API, find what the zip code belongs to, the city and the state, and then it's going to output that underneath this form field, okay? And then for this one, we'll do the same thing, and it will output in the form field underneath here, okay? So that's what we're trying to accomplish. Now, looking at the source code up here, you can go over to your start.html. You can see that in the heading over here, we've just got some basic meta. We've got some, the bootstrap CSS is this file here. And then we link to a styles.css, which is in your project file as well. That basically just has the basic file, the basic source code here, just to make it look like it does, like we see it. All right, so now that we've got that out of the way, underneath that, in the body, you're gonna find the div with the ID of app. Everything inside of here is gonna be our view object, okay? And then inside of here, you're gonna see basically the core of this project is in this lead form right here. This is that center box on our screen. We've got a heading 1 that says fill out the form. We've got the line underneath. And then we've got this little group here is our form, the input box for the starting zip code. This is the input box for the ending zip code. And then this is the button that says submit, all right? So that's our project in a nutshell. Now you will see underneath each of these inputs, we have a span tag. This span tag is where we're actually going to output to the user what the result is back from the API. So for example, Beverly Hills, California. I'm just going to hard code it for now, but just so you can see it. And if we go back over here, you can see that it actually outputs Beverly Hills underneath. And so that's what that span tag is. There's one under each of these, which is going to show the result back from the API. All right, we'll make all this dynamic here in just a second. Okay, now that we got the HTML down, you can see we've got 3 script tags. One of them is view.js. One of them is a JavaScript library called Axios. Axios is an HTTP library for JavaScript. So if you've followed along with my tutorials before and you've done some of the Laravel stuff or the PHP stuff, we used, whenever we're working with an API in Laravel, we always use, or I tend to use the Guzzle HTTP library. Guzzle is a PHP version of an HTTP library. Axios is the exact same thing, but for JavaScript, okay? It allows us to make those API requests, a GET request, POST requests, PUT requests, all that kind of stuff asynchronously, and get the results back and modify them, okay? And then the last library we have is another JavaScript library called Lodash. Now, Lodash is basically a bunch of helper functions for JavaScript. They're kind of like all the missing functions you wish JavaScript had. A lot of PHP has a lot of these built in. Just different ways to modify strings and arrays and stuff like that. They're a little harder in JavaScript, in my opinion, and Lodash is kind of like the way to make it easier and just kind of cleans up the code and takes a lot of those kind of simple things that just take up a lot of code in JavaScript and makes them easy. So we'll be using Lodash today. Underneath that is the where we actually initialize the Vue project, and you can see right now we just initialize it into the element with the ID of app, and that's our Vue project, okay? All right, so now we got all that out of the way. What are we going to do from here? Well, the first thing we need to do when we create a view object is we set up our data models, right? So we have our data models in here, and then we output all of them here with initial values, right? So which values are we going to need? If we head back over to our project, you can kind of see what you think we might need. So first of all, we are going to have a starting zip code. So as we type in a zip code here, we need to monitor that zip code so that Vue knows what that zip code is. So we need a starting zip value. We also need the same thing for ending zip code. So we need to monitor this one. We're going to need some sort of property that stores the ending zip code. All right. Well, then after we get that number, it gets up to 5 digits. We're going to then go out to the API. We're going to figure out what that zip code translates into for city and state. And then we're going to save that value into another property that we can, access whenever we want to. Okay, so that value is going to be underneath here, and we're going to need a starting value and an ending value. So in total, we have 4 objects we need to monitor. So let's set those up. So first one we're going to want is starting zip code. And we're going to initialize that to nothing at the beginning. It's just going to be an empty string because we don't know what the user is going to type in there. So we'll just initialize it, but it'll be empty. The next thing is going to be the starting city. Okay, and I'm just going to put starting city, but this is going to be the starting zip code after it's translated into an actual city and state, into a string basically. And then the result of that is going to be starting city. All right, and once again, to start with, we can just initialize it to be empty. We're going to do the exact same thing for the ending zip codes. So for ending zip, we're going to have another blank one. And then for ending city, it's going to be the same thing that this is, but it's going to be for this zip code, okay? So the ending value. So those are the 4 objects that we want, and just in order to get started. Let's link these now up above. So if we come back up here, we can now take this input, and we know that we want this value of this input, whatever the user puts in here, to be the value for starting zip code. And then obviously for the ending zip code, we want the same thing down here. So let's tie those together. And of course, you should know this if you've been following along. It's vmodel. And if you don't know anything about vmodel, you're going to want to go back to the previous videos and take a look at it where we talk about it in more detail. Okay, so we're going to tie this input to the vmodel of starting zip. And then we're going to want to tie this one to the vmodel of ending zip. Just like that. Okay? All right, now that we've got that, we can also go ahead and tie this ending zip and ending city, or sorry, starting city and, over here. So this is going to be the value of starting city, and then this is going to be the value of ending city, like that. All right? Okay, so now we basically have the core functionality set up. So in fact, let's go ahead and just change these real quick. Starting zip and ending zip. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to display the value of what we've input here just to make sure it's working. So if we come back over here and refresh, as you can see here, as we type in a zip code, it obviously outputs it here. So we know it's updating that zip code as we add the values, right? This one's not for some reason. Ending zip, oh, is it not saved? I must not have saved it correctly. Oh, it was. Okay, so we did it right. It just wasn't saved for some reason. All right, so now that we got that out of the way, now we're going to want to set up the next functions, okay? So we're going to want to eventually create our methods, and the methods are going to go out to the API and make the request. But we can't quite do that yet because you got to think about it. We don't want to run every time we run for example, let's say we start with nothing here. We refresh the page. Let's say that someone starts typing a zip code. They start typing 90210, right? So they type 9. Right? Well, we don't want to go out and send an API request when it's only one number, 9. We know it's an invalid zip code. We don't want to, do an API request for that one number. They type 9190210. It's only when they hit that 5th number we want to send out the API request, right? We don't want to do it on every single one, all right? So what we're going to introduce now is another directive or whatever in Vue where we can watch the properties, okay? And that's what we're going to set up now. So we're going to now set up something called watch. Oh, come on. Watch. And with watch, what it's going to do is it's now going to set it up so that basically we only run the method when a certain item occurs, when something happens, okay? So let's go ahead and we're gonna set up 2 of these. The first one is going to be the starting zip code. And then the second, and so that's what we're watching here. So we're gonna do starting zip. And so we're telling it to watch the starting zips. So this is the value for starting zip. And of course, as we adjust it in the input, starting zip will change. And then all that watch is doing is we're telling it to watch this item, okay? So it's watching this item up here, okay? So it's gonna watch starting zip, and then it's going to, what's it going to do as it changes, okay? That's what this function is gonna set up for us, okay? And what we're gonna do is we're just going to say this dot starting city, and we're gonna set this equal to nothing. Okay, so basically if someone starts editing or changing the zip code, we're just gonna go ahead and erase the value of starting city. Now, if they've never gotten a value before, that's okay. But if we go out to the API, we say it's Beverly Hills, and then they delete a number, we're gonna go ahead and just delete the value of starting city because it's no longer representative of the zip code, okay? So we're just kind of nullifying it and killing it. All right, so the next thing we wanna do is before we actually call the method and tell it to go out to the API, we wanna make sure it's 5 digits, okay? If it's only 2 or 3 digits, it's not worth going and making an API request. Okay, so now we're gonna run an if statement, and we're gonna tell it if this dot starting city dot length is equal to 5, then we want to go ahead and call the method, right? Okay, so that's kind of the goal. And if it doesn't, then it's just going to ignore everything, and the value will just be an empty, the value for starting city right here will just be empty. So that's kind of our goal, is we want to call the method to run the API request if it's equal to 5, and if it's not, it's just going to just leave it starting city empty, okay? So that's basically what we're doing. So now let's go ahead and call this. So we're going to do this dot and then the name of the method that we want to run. So we're going to call it look up starting zip. Okay, and that's going to run that method. Okay, so now let's go ahead and actually just get this set up. Let's set up this method. So let's go down to the end of this bracket here, and now we're going to set up these methods, okay? And again, we did these in other videos, so if you're lost, you may want to go back there. This example is really tying a lot of what we've learned together, okay? And now inside of our methods is where we can actually create the name of the method. So in this case, we were trying to call a method called lookup starting zip. Well, let's go ahead and create that method now. So we're going to call it lookup starting zip, and then we're going to give it a name of a function. It's going to go ahead and run this function, and that's what's going to happen. This is where we're actually going to input the API request. Now, before we run this function, we actually want to just kind of wait a second before we actually initialize it, and that's where Lodash comes in. We're going to do this _.dbounce. And this .dbounce is a function in Lodash that basically, it just waits to perform the function until a certain amount of time has occurred. And what this does is prevents, let's say someone's typing in a zip code and they're trying to type in like 6 or 7 numbers. Instead of as soon as they hit that 5th number, or maybe they hit the 5th number and they quickly click delete because it was the wrong number, and then they type the right number, instead of trying to run the API request, as soon as they hit that 5th number, we want to give them a chance to kind of stop for a second, just to make sure it's the number that they're expecting to give us. And that's what dbounce allows us to do. It allows us to set an interval to kind of wait and before we perform a certain function. So the way that dbounce works is we actually will, create the function, and then as a second parameter, we tell it how many milliseconds to wait before it actually performs that function, okay? And if something changes during this amount of time, it doesn't perform the function. Again, this helps save on the API request, save on, the server processes we're doing and everything like that. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to tell it to wait half a second, 500 milliseconds, and then it's going to perform the function where it actually goes out to the API. Okay, and so that's what dbounce is. Make sure you get this underscore. This is all a Lodash method, and this just kind of shows you also that you can pull any other JavaScript libraries into your Vue.js project. Okay, it's really, really flexible like that. Okay, so we're going to use this dbounce method, then we're going to perform a function. This function is going to be our where we actually go out to the API, And then of course it waits it's only going to do this if there's a 500 millisecond delay. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do the next part. So what we're going to do here is we know that it's the length is 5 digits, right? So we know it's 5 digits. So now what we can do is we can actually just go ahead and start running the API request. Now the first thing that I actually like to do, and you saw this in the example, is when it was going out to perform the API request, it quickly said searching, and it was searching for the zip code, okay? And I like to do that from like a user experience standpoint because it tells the user that something is happening. And sometimes the API requests can be like instantaneous, and sometimes they can get delayed. And there's lots of reasons for that. Like, for example, it's actually kind of ironic because this is Thanksgiving weekend. The video this is going out is actually the week of Thanksgiving. And the USPS, which is the API that all of this data comes from, USPS last Thanksgiving, for day after Thanksgiving, which we call Black Friday in the United States, for all the you Americans out there know it, but some people outside the United States may not know what Black Friday is. We call it Black Friday is the day after our Thanksgiving, and it's basically the beginning of the Christmas holiday. It's the biggest shopping day of the year. So everyone goes out and buys Christmas presents on Black Friday. And so anyway, basically all the e-commerce websites get tons and tons and tons of traffic on Black Friday. Now, a couple years ago, it wasn't last year, I guess, but a couple years ago, I was working for an e-commerce company, and we rely, like all e-commerce companies, we rely on the post office the API from the post office to get shipping prices for different things. So when people order a package, we want to know how much that package is going to cost to ship. So we use the API to basically see what the package would, what the package would cost. The API tells us how much, and then we charge that to the user. Well, this happens across many, many e-commerce sites. And so what happened is USPS went down on Black Friday a couple years ago. And there are other times where they get busy, maybe around Christmas or around Valentine's Day or something. They get very, very busy, and when they get lots of requests, maybe their server is going to be kind of slow. And so the point is that sometimes the server can be really fast, sometimes it can be really slow. That's one of the things when you're working with APIs you have to understand, is that you don't know how long it's going to take to get a response back from a server. It depends on that server, and that server could vary depending on lots of other things, like however many people in the world are trying to request data from that server and all sorts of stuff like that. So what I like to do is I like to put in a little thing that says like searching or looking up or something like that, so the user knows something's happening. They don't feel like the website's broken. They get that kind of sense, oh, it's looking for it. And it might take a second or two to find it, and they're okay with that because they can see that the computer's working, okay? So what I want to do here is before we actually go out to make the API request, I'm actually going to change the value of starting city to searching, okay? So what we're going to do here is we're going to say starting city equals searching dot, okay? So in fact, we can go ahead and test this right now, but this is going to then, say searching, and then we know that it's running the API request. Now, when we get the result back from the API request, we're going to change this value to the result of the API request. And so in that period of time between before it starts looking, before it requests the API request and when it finishes the API request, just in that split second is when it's going to say searching. Otherwise, it's going to override it, okay? And then, of course, if they decide to change a value up here, we're going to set it equal to 0 to empty anyway. So this is only going to be for like a split second, but it just kind of shows the user that something's happening. Okay, so now let's go ahead and take a look at this in the browser, see how it's working so far. What we would expect is that basically underneath the input field, whenever we hit 5 numbers, we would expect it to say searching, okay? That's basically what we're expecting. And we should have basically there'll be a half-second delay between when we type that 5th number and when it says searching, just to make sure that we actually were typing. And if we type past it in less than half a second, then it shouldn't say anything. So let's go back to the browser and take a look at this. Just refresh this, and let's go and type the number in. Okay, it looks like we actually have, we're still outputting the starting zip instead of the city. Okay, so we want to output this value in the span tag, but it looks like we're still outputting this tag. So starting zip, city. So now it should show the value of starting city right here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and refresh. Let's type in some numbers. And when we hit that fifth number, okay, we would actually expect it to do something. It's not doing it. So there's a problem. So let's go back, take a look at it here. Okay, so for some reason, it should be showing the value of this, but it's not. Let's see, make sure we're doing the right. So this dot starting city, yep. Oh, here's the problem. Okay, so the problem is we're checking the length of starting city, and we need to check the length of starting zip. Okay, we want to check the length of this property, but we were checking the length of this, which we set it equal to nothing, and then we checked the value of it to see if it was 5, and it's always going to be nothing, so it's never going to enter this method. So that was the problem. So let's go ahead and refresh. And now let's type it in again. And as you can see there, as we typed it in, it now says searching, okay? So that's perfect. That's the exact result we want. In fact, let's go ahead and get rid of one. You can see it goes away from searching. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, now we can go ahead and actually make the API request, okay? So we're gonna set it equal to searching. And then after we set it equal to searching, we'll make the API request. When we get the response back, we'll set it equal to the response value, and then it'll look appropriate, I think. Okay? So now in order to make the API request, we're going to be using that Axios library. Okay, so we're going to call Axios in order to use the library, and we're going to do axios.get, and that's going to use a get method and then this is going to be our URL, okay? So you can do a get method, you could do a post method, it's whatever type of HTTP method you're doing. Now in our case, what we're going to be doing is a get method. And let me actually just show you the API request real quick so you guys know what's going on. Sorry, I had a text message, kind of screwed it up. Okay, so originally, in the example that I showed you, I actually used the USPS.com API. And this is the API that they've got. You can see here, these are the user guides. The one that we're using is the city and state lookup. And if you look at the documentation, you can see that it looks really outdated. And it is. It actually is really ghetto for an API. Here's the one that we're using. This is literally the API documentation for what we're doing. And it's kind of complicated. It's actually overly complicated for what you're doing. I just need to give you a zip code and I want you to tell me what city and state it is. That's all I want. And it's actually a ton of you have to create these XML documents and stuff like that, like this. And it's kind of a pain in the butt. You also have to register with USPS in order to use the API, which I know a lot of you guys don't want to do just for this tutorial because you may never need it and you don't want to have that account set up. So we're actually not going to use the USPS API. We're going to use a different one that's a little easier, but it's going to ring true. It's the exact same thing. If you wanted to use this one, it's the exact same thing that I'm showing you. You're just going to call a different URL and you need to prep your data a little bit differently. So in this example, when you're using USPS.com's API, you need to prep the data into an XML and do some stuff like that. And with the other API that I'm going to show you, it's really easy. You don't have to do as much prep. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's go on over. The one that I wanted to give you, the example that I wanted to give you guys was ziptasticapi.com, okay? ziptasticapi.com, Ziptastic. And this is a really basic API. And behind the scenes, they're just doing the exact same thing. They're just going out to USPS.com database and they're doing it there, but they've just made it a lot easier. So to use their API, all you need to do is make a GET request to ziptasticapi.com, and then you can do / and then the zip code, okay? So you can see the results here, 90210. We make the request, and then it returns back JSON value for this. Now, the other thing we can do is if you want to use some sort of API tool like this, we can do the exact same thing here. Let's go ahead and create a new tab. We'll do a GET request. We'll do ziptasticapi.com / and then 90210, the zip code that we want. We're going to click send, and you can see now that we actually get back. There we go. We actually get back the result. This is the result that we get back, and it's JSON. So we've got the country object, state, and city. It gives us all the information that we need as a nice little JSON, okay? So you can do it however you want. What we're going to be doing though is we're just going to be grabbing this ziptasticapi.com / and then we just need to give it the value of the zip code. So it's really easy to use, and then we'll get this response back. We actually don't need to do any authentication, so you don't need to set up an account or anything like that, and it's unlimited use. So it's pretty easy, so that's why I wanted to use it for the tutorial today. Okay, so when we use our axios.get, we're going to give it the URL we want to go out to. In this case, we're going to want to go out to ziptasticapi.com / and then we're just going to append onto the back of that the value of the zip code, starting zip, okay? So we'll do starting zip like that. It's going to add that onto the end of the / and it's going to then go out to that URL and then give us back the response, okay? Now with Axios, what we want to do is a .then. So the .then basically tells it what to do after it's gotten a response back from the server, okay? So it's going to go out to this server, and then after that, you're going to perform some sort of function, right? And that's what's going to happen after it gets the data back. It's how you're going to process it, okay? So we're going to perform a function. We're going to pass in the response. This response comes from Axios, and that's going to be part of the function so that we can use that response to generate something. And then from here, what we're going to do is we're going to do this. We're actually going to use that response to set the value of starting city. So we're going to do this .starting city, and we're going to set it equal to response.data . And then we can use the value that we had here. So did we already get rid of our shit? We already did. Let's just call it again. Okay, so you can see here we have a country parameter, we have a state parameter, and a city. And this is all together considered the data. So when we do response.data, we're getting this item here. So then we can call the state by just doing .state, or the city by calling .city. All right, so that's what we're going to do here. So we're going to do .city, and that's going to give us back the city. And then we're going to add a comma and a space, and then we're going to add the state. Okay, so we'll do the same thing here, response.data.state, and that'll be the the state that it belongs to. Now after that's all we really need to do is we're just setting the starting city equal to that value. And then the last thing we can do before we finish up is if there's some sort of error, we want to catch the error and display that to the user. And we can use, this is another thing for Axios, all this together is one function. So we're going to do a .catch. And with .catch, we can perform another anonymous function. We'll pass in the error. And we're not going to display the error, but you could display the error to the user because you've got the object there. And then we're just going to do this .starting city, and we're going to set it equal to invalid zip code. Okay? So if they give us an invalid zip code, it returns an error. We're just going to say invalid zip code back to the user. Okay? And then that is basically everything that we need to do. That's it. So let's go ahead and save this, and let's now test it in our project. So let's go back over to our project here, refresh. Now you can see 90210. It's searching. Da-da-da-da. It didn't work. I don't think it worked. Okay, so there must be some sort of problem. So let's go back and look at it. What did we do wrong here? Oh, I see what we did wrong. I think we only called starting zip, and we need to call this .starting zip, okay? Because it wasn't outputting any sort of value there. Did we make that mistake anywhere else? No. Okay, let's try it again. Little error. Okay, so now we got this 90210. It's searching. Dun, da, da, da. Still no response. That's not a good sign. Okay. What else did we do wrong? Ziptasticapi.com. It looks like we did that correctly. Okay, so now this error was a little bit harder for me to find. But what we actually need to do is, because of inheritance inside of here, we actually need to create a variable called anything. You can call it anything, but we'll call it VM for view model. And we'll set it equal, or you can call it app. So we'll set var app equals this. And it's going to take the current this object and then set it equal to app. And then we can just change all of these instances of this to app, okay? And now, from what I think this will work. This is something I actually kind of messed me up when I did it myself, and I kind of forgot about that. 90210. Searching Beverly Hills, California. Perfect. So it does work. Sweet. So that's all it takes, guys. We now called an external API. All right, now the last thing we would need to do is we need to do the same thing here, but for our ending zip code. So let's go ahead and copy this. Let's paste it. We're gonna do ending. We're gonna watch. So we're gonna first watch the ending zip. Then we're gonna do this dot ending city is equal to nothing. Then we're gonna check the length of ending zip is equal to 5. And then we're going to do this dot lookup starting, or we're going to do lookup ending zip now, just like that. All right, now inside of methods, we need to create a method for lookup ending zip, and we're going to copy all this. Let's see here. Yeah, let's copy all of this and paste it below. Now we're going to look up the ending zip like that. And then we can basically do almost everything is exactly the same. All this starting cities, though, we can just do ending city. And then this starting zip will be ending zip. And everything else should be exactly the same, it looks like. Yep, it should. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and test this one more time. Inside of here, you can see 90210, and it should search for it. Now 97124. Oh, we need to output something different to the user. So up here we can do ending city like that. Save it, refresh. Now let's do it again. And there we go. So now we've gone ahead and we've created these, so we can type it in and we're getting the value. Of course, if we delete the value, add another one, it finds it. Of course, that one is undefined. But anyway, it finds all of those values, okay? So there you guys go. Hopefully that was useful. That was something interesting and a little bit different. Some real world projects where we actually put Vue to the test. We did something, and we also called APIs, and we did all sorts of cool stuff like that. This is something I know you guys were requesting. You wanted to learn how to use APIs and how to tie in with Vue, and now you guys know how to do it. Now we're gonna tie in and do some more advanced stuff with this project down the road, and we're going to tie in with a more advanced Vue project as well. But this is the first little taste of what is to come with Vue, and you can see how awesome and dynamic you can create these applications to be. So we're able to create very fluid applications that create really cool user experiences, all right? And again, this is just the beginning. So be sure to stay tuned for more from this series. Also, if you like this videos, you like me as a teacher, please subscribe. It gives me, tells me that you guys are enjoying the videos and helps me make more videos as well. So I'd really love that thumbs up. If you guys have already subscribed, just thumbs up the video. And if you haven't, make sure to subscribe and then thumbs up it as well. If you guys have any questions, leave a comment below and hopefully we can help each other out if you get stuck in various portions. But other than that, I will see you guys in the next video.